What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Casual Wrestling Daily Podcast. I am your host, the Notorious Nerdy D, the man who reads and deciphers the dirt sheets so you don't have to. Make sure if you are listening on podcast networks or watching on YouTube, please like and leave a comment on this week's episode. Quick shout out to this week's Patreon producers. We have Jay by Proxy, Muscle Fiend 53, Randall Beatley, the OG Ian the Noobs Newberry, and OG It's Zinny. Thank you guys for supporting the show. With that being said, let's jump straight into tonight's show with our top story. So, it looks like Ric Flair may have let the cat out of the bag about Hulk Hogan returning to WWE. During a recent podcast, Flair talked about his memories with Hogan and mentioned that he'll be seeing him on January 23rd, which just so happens to be the 30th anniversary of Monday Night Raw. It's going to be interesting to see what happens on January 23rd as it takes place just 1 week before the Royal Rumble. Look, I'll break this down. With all of the bad blood running through the WWE right now, and by bad blood, I mean Vince McMahon, the return of Vince McMahon, I don't know if bringing back the resident racist of WWE is the best idea. And I believe in second chances, and I know that he's come back since then, and the fans have been accepting, but like these are kind of troubled times around the WWE. And I don't know that bringing back Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan is necessarily the best idea. To me, this is starting to feel, as I've speculated in the last couple weeks, this feels like a very Vince McMahon-ish creative department idea. This doesn't feel like the more progressive ideas that Triple H has at least tried to present forward in recent weeks. This feels much more like something that Vince McMahon would do. Now, you have to ask the question, how much faith can you put into something that Ric Flair says on a podcast? And I think that is a very valuable question to ask because Ric Flair likes to hear himself talk. And there's a good chance that Ric Flair has gone on whatever podcast he has gone on and spout off at the mouth and just said a bunch of things to get the internet talking. Highly, highly possible. But it's also possible that this is entirely true, that Ric Flair is going to be on the January 23rd episode of Monday Night Raw, along with Hulk Hogan, and this is the reality of what we have to deal with. And so you have to ask yourself, what role are Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair going to play if they do return on Raw? Is it just, ceremoniously them showing up, waving to the crowd, and just, the old standard rigmarole of just, here they are, bring out the old guys, show them off to the crowd, and then you guys go back to the back before you say something. Like, Hulk Hogan has a tendency at WrestleMania 30 to just say the wrong thing, to just call out the wrong arena, to just, to put his foot in his mouth, possibly. But, from my point of view, if you're asking me what this looks like to me, this looks like the WWE is collecting a set of sinister senior trading cards. You have one card for Hogan's racist past. You have another card for Flair's sexist attitude. And then you get the special edition hologram Vince McMahon card for questionable business practices. I mean, it's honestly like WWE's trying to complete like the Pokemon deck of villainry. And I know that's a little bit of an overreaction, but it does feel like in these times, we just came out of the short-lived Stephanie McMahon CEO era, where it felt like all rainbows and butterflies. And Vince McMahon has returned to what I'll call the doom and gloom era, where it seems like everybody's lost their shit. And all of a sudden, you start bringing back these familiar old faces who have a little bit of a checkered past. And I think it's fair to say at this point that the reception for Vince McMahon and his return has been less than welcoming. And so you have to ask the question, if the fans were not welcoming to Vince McMahon, how are they going to respond to the old staple of Vince McMahon tricks, like bringing Hulk Hogan back, like bringing in Ric Flair? You have to ask the question. Now, I get it. Like, Hulk Hogan's a folklore hero inside of WWE. There's a possibility he comes back and nobody bats an eyelid, and he comes back and it's smooth sailing and the crowd cheers and chants and they love him and nobody on the internet gets upset. But more than likely, you're going to have some sort of public outcry. And I don't necessarily think that that's all on Hulk Hogan. I think a lot of it is on the timing of the situation. I think the timing puts him in a precarious situation. With Vince McMahon coming back after all of the allegations and all of the things that he did, coming back to kind of strong arm himself back into the company, I think that it puts Hulk Hogan in a precarious situation. We have to remember, it's well documented that Hulk Hogan's popularity declined significantly after the audio recordings of him making racist comments came out in 2015. And we can't forget that the WWE terminated his contract. They disciplined him, unlike they were able to do to Vince McMahon. They removed Hulk Hogan from the Hall of Fame. They scrubbed him from the company. All things that they were unable to do with Vince McMahon for his alleged shady business practices. And so then Hulk Hogan lost sponsorship. Companies distanced themselves from him. He lost several endorsement deals. He also faced backlash from fans and wrestlers. His merchandise declined. Like, all of these things happened. So it's fair to say that Hulk Hogan has had significant impact on his career and his public image from things that he's done in his past. And while we may have forgiven him, and sometimes something somebody else does can just by proxy make us remember all of the negatives surrounding like the return of somebody. Now, I get that there are counter arguments to what I'm saying, right? You can make a counter argument that you have to believe in second chances and you have to believe that Hulk Hogan's changed and the fans have embraced him even after everything that's happened. And there's a chance that Hulk Hogan returns and he's such a folklore hero in the WWE that he can transcend the tidal wave of crap that Vince has kind of reintroduced into the company, and the crowd just openly embraces Hulk Hogan. It's absolutely positive. That is always an option. And it's probably very realistic that could happen. But the reality is there's going to be a subculture on the internet who bring up some of this negativity, who bring up this stuff. And there will always be a little bit of a dark cloud over a company who continues to bring back people with sexist past, people with racist past, people with shady business practices. Like there will be a dark cloud that sits over the top of your head, and it's all based on the timing. And I don't understand, because the Raw 30th anniversary, it's already got everything it needs to set the ratings in the position it needs, right? You're bringing back the bloodline, or all generations of the bloodline, as the Usos said. So it's silly to overshadow that with relics that have a sketchy past. And you're just 1 week out from the Royal Rumble. It seems odd to me that you're trying to create a show with this much hype. It really feels very Vince McMahonish. It feels like Vince wants to leave an impact on WWE right before Royal Rumble. He wants to reestablish his dominance by implementing. I have no information. This may be Triple H, but it just doesn't feel like something Triple H would do. And it just seems weird to try to bring back Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair and these people if there's any chance that The Rock shows up on the Raw 30th anniversary edition, which is what we all kind of assume is happening, either by video or either by just, reference or speculation, which, leads to an appearance at the Royal Rumble. It's all possible, but it does seem weird to me that all of this is surfacing and that Ric Flair is kind of putting this out there into the universe. And none of this feels like a Triple H move to me. Stop what you're doing right now and head over to patreon.com/The Casual Wrestling Show and hit that follow button. And if you really enjoy the content, become a patron of the show for just $5 a month. You'll gain access to behind-the-scenes videos and all kinds of exclusive content. That's patreon.com/The Casual Wrestling Show. I put my heart and soul into trying to provide you guys with entertaining podcasts every day, and I truly appreciate every single person who listens to the podcast, whether you're a patron or not. Now let's get back to it. All right, now that we've covered the top story today in pro wrestling, let's dive into tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite. As we all know, Dynamite tends to skew more for the IWC audience, but what many less trained eyes might not see that yours truly can see is that if you look close enough, you might actually find some little jewels sprinkled in that appeal to the casual wrestling fans. So I want to take a look at the 3 most casual and 3 most not so casual things that happened on last night's episode of AEW Dynamite. If you're ready, let's jump right into it with the most casual moments from last night's AEW Dynamite, starting with number 1, the complete mess that was the opening match that saw casual wrestling favorite Orange Cassidy take on Jay Lethal. Now, this match was full of complete nonsense. I mean, this was a shit show from start to finish. There were 5 superstars that sat ringside, all thanks to having tickets that were shown, that were pulled out of an envelope and shown, including one Jeff Jarrett who had a ticket to the show, who allegedly could get, I don't know the manager's name who runs, it's Dutt, I think Dutt. He could get Dutt fired if he interfered in the match, which is a stipulation I didn't even know about, but all of this apparently has been worked out the last couple weeks. By Danhausen was an usher. Like this, I can't make this up. This is all really happening in the opening match of Dynamite this week. Danhausen was an usher who at one point jumps over the ring, the ring barricade, takes off the usher uniform, and becomes a manager in the match, right? The best friends were in the crowd. They were holding beer and popcorn. And basically Cassidy just, did the normal Orange Cassidy stuff. He did a crazy spot where like he rolled around on his back in the ring for 5 minutes to avoid Jay Lethal so that he couldn't do a top rope dive on top of him. There was a part where Danhausen cursed Jay Lethal with Jeff Jarrett's guitar, and it all led to Orange Cassidy getting a clean finish. Like I said, you can't make this kind of shit up. It's worth a watch. If you don't watch AEW Dynamite, it is worth going back and finding this match and just watching it for the complete circus that it was to start the show. Now, the second most casual moment that happened during AEW Dynamite is the Young Bucks took on Top Flight. And while there's no real rhyme or reason for this match to happen because the Young Bucks are the trio tag team champions and Top Flight are not the tag team champion, but they're a current up and coming duo tag team. It doesn't make sense. It just happened. But I saw it. It happened. It featured a lot of talent, a lot of high-flying talent in the ring. Kenny Omega was nowhere to be found, but this match was full of all of the Circus Soleil shit that gets the IWC off at night. And as a casual fan, it's fun to watch. It's not my cup of tea. It's not my normal flavor of pro wrestling that I like to watch, but it's a train wreck. It's a dumpster fire. It's whatever it is. You just can't take your eyes off of it. And there was a lot of it. Dante Martin is extremely impressive. I thought Darius Martin impressed me. The Young Bucks, I just think there's zero storytelling to them, but they're impressive in the ring. They're fun to watch. And they put over the Top Flight, which was cool to see. It was cool to see them put over a young tag team. And it makes sense that, they have nothing to gain. They are in the trios division. So cool to see. There were some cool tributes to the Briscoes that were fitting. It was a fun match to watch. If you have extra time after you've watched the train wreck that was the Orange Cassidy match, throw on the Young Bucks versus Top Flight match because it's worth a watch as well. Now, the third most casual thing that happened during Dynamite this week was we got a rare sighting of Jake Hager. And it was Jake Hager versus Ricky Starks. And it was hidden on the middle of the card where only you can, where the IWC's probably taking their break from their basement. But it was a fun little gem. It wasn't the best match ever. It was your standard Jake Hager kind of lumbering around the ring. Ricky Starks looked like he might have injured his ankle at one point, but it ended with Starks going over with a spear as he proceeded to then run out of the arena through the crowd to avoid the Jericho Appreciation Society beating him down post-match. But, there's something to be said. I got to take a second to talk about Ricky Starks is a star in the making. Now, let me put an asterisk next to that. He's a star in the making for AEW. I think that he has a glass ceiling in AEW, but just based on sheer size and just, and charisma and all that. He has everything he needs to be extremely successful within the company of AEW. I don't think he goes any farther anywhere else. I don't know that he has intentions to go any farther anywhere else, and I hope he proves me wrong at some point. But as far as I can see, he is a perfect fit for AEW and their kind of size requirements to be a star. But one thing that I think is holding Ricky Starks back and that he should take kind of an introspective look to is his finishing maneuver. He uses a spear as a finishing maneuver. And I just think for somebody of his size, it's not necessarily the most devastating or incredibly entertaining move to see him finish. He feels like he could have something way more exciting. He just needs a different move to finish off the matches. Something, he gets all the comparisons to The Rock. Whether that's fair or unfair, I definitely can see it. He has kind of the same charisma, not necessarily on the microphone, but just in his movements, in his face attitude. He definitely has a magnetism to him. And I think he needs a finisher that is more of the lines of like the People's Elbow or the Rock Bottom, something that gets the crowd excited. Because that spear, I get that you can hit it out of nowhere, but it doesn't put the explanation point on the end of the match for me. Now, there were 3 not so casual things that happened on Dynamite that I feel like they're still keeping AEW from reaching its massive commercial success. And we'll start with number 1 with where the hell was Adam Cole? You run a little video package that just recaps what happens last week. How do you not capitalize off the heat that he got last week in his return? Like, the crowd was fucking phenomenal. Put Adam Cole in front of his fans every week. I don't care how you have to get him there. If you have to do it via satellite because he's still not cleared to travel every week, figure it out. Figure out a way to do it, because his entrance alone, when you watch it as a casual fan, it makes you go, oh, this guy means something. This guy means something to the wrestling industry, right? This guy comes out and the crowd responds. And if it's your first time watching AEW, Adam Cole's entrance is one of the few entrances. He has the timing, he has the cadence, he has the crowd behind him. It's one of the few entrances that really rivals WWE entrances. And when you watch it, you go, he's a big deal. And I think there's a failure in not having him on television every week. And if you can get him live and in person, it's great. If you can just get him, even via satellite, that's fine. But get him in front of the crowd, because it always feels like in AEW, it always feels like they're saving something for next week to me. They don't know how, they don't really understand how to use momentum. You come off of that surprise return with Adam Cole, and I get he may not be 100% ready to wrestle, but keep putting him in front of that crowd. Keep letting that crowd get excited. Keep letting him talk. That man can talk, and that man can make an entrance. And I think you need to do both on a weekly basis instead of just going, well, this happened last week, and that's kind of it. That doesn't make sense to me. The number 2 not so casual thing that happened on AEW Dynamite was this storyline between MJF and Bryan Danielson. It is the most convoluted, ridiculous, nonsensical story I have ever seen as a casual wrestling fan. It seems like this story has gone from MJF versus Bryan Danielson and turned more into the showcase of Bryan Danielson versus whatever indie darling we can find locally to wrestle Bryan Danielson. And you have MJF acting like he's a tough guy in the back now, slapping people, handing them money. I just think that's a poor use of the MJF character. We're reverting back to kind of the Wardlow days. And I thought MJF had evolved. I thought MJF had worked on his physique, and he was becoming a guy who could stand on his own. And we're turning back to these like kind of weird tropes of like a rich heel, which I think MJF, I think he's more dynamic than that now. I don't think he needs to pay people to injure Bryan Danielson. I think that's played out. I don't like the tough guy. Now, he could be sneaky, he could be slimy, but once again, it's another week where MJF isn't out in front of the crowd. So now you have Adam Cole not in front of the crowd. You have MJF not in front of the crowd. I think that Tony Khan just has a problem capitalizing on momentum. When people are paying attention to MJF, he's nowhere to be found. He's cutting promos from the back, and I just don't think that's best for business. That's not going to bring in your casual audience. That belt, that big, beautiful belt, needs to be front and center in the middle of the ring every week, especially when you have WWE, who currently has a champion who is, for lack of better terms, a part-timer. He's not going to show up every week. So if I was AEW, I would have my champion in the ring, front and center, in front of everybody, week after week, showing that my champion shows up. I get that MJF is not going to wrestle every week, but he should be in the middle of the ring, cutting a promo and holding that big belt. But what we get, we're continuing to get these Bryan Danielson marathon matches. And I understand, right? I understand what it's building to. It's building to this inevitable MJF versus Bryan Danielson in an Iron Man match. But this shit's not casual friendly. And I get that the whole show isn't supposed to be casual friendly, but like sticking an hour-long wrestling match in the middle of the card where it's pretty obvious that Bryan Danielson's going to continue winning these matches, so they're just exhibitions of skill. I don't know what that's going to do for ratings. That feels like something you could do on Friday Night Rampage that people might tune into because they're looking to see just the master of technique. But like on Dynamite, I think when you have 2 hours, it's weird to dedicate so much time to something that is so predictable. And it's also a little bit weird to me that the crowd keeps siding with whoever the indie darling is. They keep siding against Bryan Danielson, and it's almost like Tony Khan is trying to bury Bryan Danielson or turn him heel at this point, which isn't going to work against MJF. Like, this feud should be about MJF and Bryan Danielson in the ring at the same time, talking shit to each other, trying to declare who's the best in the world. It shouldn't be about a bunch of NPCs who come out and predictably lose to Daniel Bryan on a weekly basis. Now, the third not-so-casual moment on AEW Dynamite was the main event. It was Darby Allin versus Marty from Back to the Future. Or wait, what is his name's? I got to get this right. Kushida. And I'm sure the IWC is going to point out how disrespectful I am for not being able to say that name or for calling him Marty from Back to the Future. But, you know, dude came out in a crop top denim jacket with gym shorts and a red puffy winter vest. What else am I supposed to think? So we got the Darby Allin special, right? We got the main event is the epic 5'9" Kushida versus the massive 5'8" Darby Allin. I'm pretty sure you could stack these two guys on each other's shoulders, and I don't think they can look Braun Strowman in the eyes. And Darby Allin basically survived most of the match, having his shoulders separated from his body and avoiding this dreaded hoverboard lock that the announcers made sure to pound into our heads was this devastating maneuver, which I assume was just a Kimura lock. But now that I hear, funny thing is, now that I hear that his finishing maneuver is a hoverboard lock, it makes me believe that I don't think I'm being disrespectful. I think he is actually trying to dress like Marty from Back to the Future. So I feel a little better about that. I still don't understand the denim, the crop top denim jacket, but I get the puffy vest. It makes a little more sense. But Darby Allin survived. Darby Allin wins the match. And then the show goes off the air, and the Battle of the Giants closes out the show. Like, I mean, we can't wonder why AEW struggles in the ratings when our main event is 5'9" versus 5'8", and if you add their weight together, it's maybe 300 pounds. That, like, you can't wonder why your ratings are slipping. Do you want the chance to win a $25 WWE gift card? The Casual Wrestling Daily Show is now on all podcast networks, and we need your help. Head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and leave the show a 5-star review. Then make sure to tag us on your preferred social media network. Drawings will be held after each WWE Premium Live event, so head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and make it rain stars on the Casual Wrestling Daily Podcast. Back to the show. All right, so as a casual wrestling fan, there is always something that makes me wonder, something that I want to take a deeper dive into, but usually I just don't have the time. So I'm creating this segment where I'm going to take like one particular thing or aspect of pro wrestling that makes me go, and I take a closer look at it. And I hope you guys find this insightful. I hope you find it intriguing. So let's take a deeper dive into the world of pro wrestling in today's Notorious Thought. So the thought I had this week was, with all the talks of WWE selling the company to someone like Disney or someone like Amazon or someone like Endeavor or the Saudi Public Investment Fund, it got me wondering, what stops these companies that have these ginormous bankrolls from just going out and starting their own professional wrestling company like Tony Khan? Because it's an interesting question to me. It's something that I wonder, like, what is the difficulty? So I tried to sit down and identify the 5 biggest questions I would want to answer to kind of work through this thought line. Starting with question number 1 is, and I'm going to use Disney. Disney is going to be my example because I think that I still believe Disney is possibly the front runner to end up buying WWE. But there's a part of me that wonders why would Disney spend so much money when they have the ability to kind of do this on their own? So question 1 is, why do you think Disney has not yet already entered into the market of pro wrestling? So from my perspective, I think that the biggest concern that Disney would have right off the bat, and this is probably also with buying WWE, but also with starting their own company, is Disney's focus is family-friendly entertainment. And wrestling often doesn't completely align with that core set of values, right? Wrestling, even in its PG era, tends to have at least violence and blood, and it's incidental blood, but it happens. And I don't know that Disney is in love with the idea of something on Disney Plus or the Disney Channel or ABC or whatever, or ESPN, that is featuring, violence in a way that it, like, intended violence. I don't know that aligns with what Disney wants, and I think that's something they'd have to figure out how they wanted to portray that in the same way that they figured it out with, like, Marvel and Star Wars. And I think the second thing that Disney has to look into, and the second reason that maybe they haven't considered this, is that, they're companies like WWE, companies like AEW, companies like New Japan Pro Wrestling, they already exist. And so it's not necessarily just an open market. There is a lot of competition, and it's a lot of established competition. So you have to wonder, how hard is it to generate this, this structure for whatever you're trying to do, and then to compete with these people who already exist in that market space. Now, the one thing we do know is Disney has the resources and they have the infrastructure to support a wrestling company, right? They have all the marketing arms. They have all of the theme parks. All that stuff exists, but the high level of competition has to be a deterrent. And you always have to wonder, with that money and with that time and with that effort, is it not better for somebody to just expand their existing properties rather than investing in a new market? And so that kind of answers number 1, which led me to question number 2 was, what are the biggest challenges that Disney would face if it decided to start a pro wrestling company? Well, number 1 is building a roster, right? And I think the bigger question you have to ask is, how many established wrestlers do you need to be a viable wrestling company? Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 10? Is it 20? How many wrestlers do you need? I think you could get away with probably 6 or 7 high profile names, and then surround the rest of the company with some good indie names. When you're Disney, you have, the pocketbook is deep enough to try to entice some people over. But, you still, like, AEW was able to get Jericho and able to get a couple, at least IWC friendly names that got people. It got Cody Rhodes. There was enough energy kind of coming out of them starting the company that Tony Khan was able to establish a roster that people paid attention to. And I don't know how easy that would be. Tony Khan was a fan of the business, but when you're asking somebody like Disney, who doesn't have a background in pro wrestling, you're taking a big chance. The AEW got lucky having Jericho. Jericho was kind of a mainstay that got the company going. The second thing that you have to do is you're going to have to develop your storylines and your characters. And that's an interesting challenge because, like I said, they just never have done it before. And it can be a struggle. Then you have to build your fan base. And where are you trying to build that fan base? More than likely, it's going to be, families and kids and people who come to your theme park. And you want to probably stay away from the hardcore wrestling fan base. You don't want to get mixed up in the IWC. So is there room in the market for an even more family-friendly product than WWE? It's a question you have to ask. And look, there's probably legal and regulatory challenges that they have to deal with. You got to build all the production teams. You have to build the venues if you don't already have them on Disneyland. And you've got to make sure that the promotion's going to be profitable. And so those are all challenges that you face and hurdles that you have to overcome if you're going to start a company, which leads me to number 3. How can Disney leverage its brand image and align it, or will it clash with what pro wrestling stands for? And I think that, it's pretty well known that Disney's brand image is associated as being family friendly, wholesome values, positive role models. And pro wrestling, on the other hand, it has good guys and bad guys. And more often than not, you can portray the good guys as the winners, but there's a time where the bad guys have to win. And Disney doesn't have a big history of the villains coming out on top. So, I think that Disney's brand image, if they could separate themselves a little bit and skew it more towards like the ESPN and the sports side of their company, I think they could manage it. But if they did try to lean on it as a Disney brand for something like Disney Plus, I think that they would struggle with the associated violence and the associated adult themes and some of the over-the-top characters that get over with the crowd. Because it's not uncommon for wrestling promotions to have storylines that involve blood or profanity or sexual references. And while they're not necessarily needed, most wrestling fans expect at least a little bit of that. Fourth question I had was, what kind of audience would Disney be trying to reach with a pro wrestling promotion? And we've kind of touched on this, but we'll just double down and talk about it. It's definitely going to skew for families and younger viewers. People like myself who have children who are looking for a product that they know is 100% safe to turn on in the child's bedroom and let them watch pro wrestling. Like my 2 girls are fans of pro wrestling, but I typically don't let them watch it unsupervised. Then you wonder if Disney couldn't tap into some other audiences, right? Could they tap into fans of other properties like Marvel and Star Wars? Is there the ability to cross over certain characters into the world of wrestling? Hell, could you have a 100% wrestling promotion that used characters from your universe? Could you have Iron Man? Could you have Obi-Wan Kenobi? Is there a possibility that you create a wrestling promotion based on those properties? It's an interesting question to at least ask. Every time a WWE 2K game comes out, somebody's creating fucking Woody from Toy Story and somebody's creating Buzz Lightyear and they're having matches. So I guess it's an interesting question to ask is there space in the market for a company or even just some kind of show that happens at Disneyland based in pro wrestling and based in characters you have, because I think that Disney, they have enough leverage with the media and entertainment assets that they already have to reach a wide audience. They can at least expose a wide audience early on to a new product. It's just whether it sticks or not. And the last question that you have to ask is, do you think that Disney has the resources and the infrastructure to support a pro wrestling promotion? I think so, man. I think Disney has significant resources and infrastructure. Like, they have theme parks. They have media and entertainment divisions. They have production teams. They're already doing broadcasting. They have ESPN. They have ABC. They have the Disney Channel. They have all of this stuff in place. They do live events. So this is nothing new to them. I don't think that putting on a large-scale show is hard for somebody who runs theme parks and has arena shows like Disney on Ice. It's not hard for them to do a show on the same scale as WWE. And Disney has some of the strongest marketing and promotional teams in any business. And they have the financial capability to invest in the resources and infrastructure. So, with all of that kind of technical jargon, I think it really just boils down to, if you're Amazon, if you're Disney, if you're Endeavor, I think the hardest part of starting a wrestling company is getting a roster put together with enough names that you can keep eyeballs and people interested. I think someone like Disney may be capable of doing it through storytelling. Someone like Amazon may be able to do it through marketing and just sheerly throwing money at people. I think that, I do think that competition breeds it breeds better product. And I do think that there is room still, even with WWE, even with AEW, I think there's still room for other big companies to exist, if not in a separate space that is just similar, whether it be using Marvel characters or Disney characters or a much more family-friendly product. I think that's all possible. But, the pro wrestling market, it's dominated by WWE. We know this. And secondary to that is AEW. And then outside of that, there are smaller promotions like NWA. You have promotions overseas like New Japan Pro. You have local productions in basically every city. And so Disney, there definitely would be challenges in building a roster, building storylines, building a family base. But I think it's a fun thought to think about. I think it's realistic that if one of these rich, these cash-rich companies decided, I think that they could make a splash into the wrestling business. All right, let's end the show by shifting gears and let's delve into a topic that crossed my mind earlier today. I've come to a certain conclusion on this topic, but I want to hear from you guys. You let me know in the comments or duet this video on TikTok. I want to know if you agree or disagree with me, and if you have any compelling arguments that might change my mind. Let's open up the floor for a healthy debate on this topic. I believe wrestlers bleeding does not enhance the quality of a professional wrestling match. Change my mind. All right, so that wraps it up for today's episode. I teased filling out my Royal Rumble brackets, which I will actually do tomorrow, along with a reaction to a cool little segment from Jay Knows Wrestling, where he is going to help us out by teaching us a little bit more about a particular wrestling move. Hopefully that becomes a weekly segment that we can talk about. So look out for all that tomorrow. And as always, feel free to leave your comments on today's episode. And with that, I think it's time to ring the final bell.
Step in the ring, if you ready, let's go. Hey, casual wrestling community show. You already know, talking WWE. Keep it rolling and hosted by Notorious Nerdy D. Don't be sure that you gon' find. Tune in cause it's online. Hit 'em with a figure 4 leg lock, power driver or clothesline. We bringing that heat like for show, but you should